50/50 Carla is another wonderful episode of Cheers. This is the 20th episode of the 8th season. This is directed by the ever-brilliant James Burrows. And as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode chronologically and share some thoughts. I don't have too many thoughts with this one. There aren't really any bloopers. There are a few small things to touch on, but nothing major. Not really any interesting bits of trivia to share. It's just about what's in the episode. And there is one scene, in fact, one moment that is so perfectly executed, and it escalates, and it is one of the funniest things ever. I will never ever tire of watching it. I'll talk about that when we get there. But the whole episode is great. The only downside is that there's no Clavin. John Ratzenberger's not in this episode, and we do find out why Cliff's not there, at least. I'll talk more about that again when we get there. But the episode starts off with the gang at Cheers and Colcord making suggestions for Woody's theatre group. Robin and Frasier get very competitive with their monologues, and we have some really great performances. And ultimately, Woody decides to walk out the bar with, well, he's a pretzel. That's the best way to describe it. I think the element of surprise there is brilliant. We don't know what he's going to do for about a second as he drops down behind the bar. Actually, he's out of the bar, but at the back we can't see properly. And then the character crawls out like a pretzel, and the element of surprise there is very, very effective. Woody then comes back in the bar sometime later. He's going to be in the chorus for the production of Hair. And he then asks Frasier what it was like to be alive during the 60s. Woody Harrelson was born in 1961, so I'm pretty sure Woody Boyd would have been alive at least in some of the 60s, but nevertheless, he asks Frasier this, and Frasier gives a great response. And then Rebecca asks Woody how he feels about doing the nude scene, because Rebecca was in a production of Hair at college, and of course she's very familiar with the script, but Woody isn't having it. Of course there's not a nude scene in Hair. And then he talks about how he fell off a turnip truck, and Frasier asks him if he had any fond memories from childhood. Maybe that's why he doesn't remember the 60s. Carla then comes in from reading Eddie's will, and my first thought, I don't know if this is what I first thought when I first watched the episode, but certainly immediately when we see her, I think it's very clear to very much focus on the coat that she is wearing, which does become important. She's been at Eddie's will reading, and he left his other widow, Gloria, $100. And Carla gets his estate, which ultimately ends up being nothing. It ends up being debt for the funeral and other expenses. So she took Gloria's coat, which is gorgeous, and it really suits her. It's a really nice coat, and it really does stand out. Gloria then arrives. She's played by DeSalvo. And Gloria actually ends up giving Carla her half of the $100. And Carla gives her word that if she had anything from Eddie, she would absolutely give half of it to Gloria. Words that Carla may soon regret. I think it's very clear as she delivered those words that there was going to be some meaning to them, but what that meaning would be, only time will tell. They then go off to try and fish Gloria's keys out of a mailbox because Carla tossed them from the coat, and then Woody finally realizes that there is in fact a nude scene in Hair, and he screams, and it's a wonderfully executed moment. We then cut to Woody at the bar. There's a lot of unpredictability here, a lot of element of surprise, a lot with Woody. Woody is at the bar, naked, basically save for suspenders. The guys are talking. We find out that Lilith gets changed in the dark, at Frasier's suggestion. Carla then comes in with a new hairstyle, courtesy of Gloria. It looks decent. I don't want to say completely that it suits her, but it kind of does. If that was the character's regular hairstyle, I think she could get away with it. Norm then remarks that Cliff has gone to the hospital or something. He clearly isn't that concerned. But it's nice that they included Cliff by name, even if Ratzenberger wasn't in the actual episode. And then Carla, having read a letter that she just received, finds out that she's actually come into $50,000 from the ice show's accidental death policy. And this is the bit that I love. It's my favourite moment in the episode. Maybe my favourite moment in the season. Possibly one of my favourite moments of all time. Because Carla, in her excitement, kisses Norm. Norm is falling backwards in his stool. Sam jumps onto the bar to pull Norm up so he doesn't fall. And then there's a slight moment of calm. And then Carla grabs onto Norm again, pulls him onto the bar, kisses him again. He is flustered. Sam, without missing a beat, slides a compensation beer over to Norm across the bar. It's a wonderful moment. It's absolutely fabulous. And then Sam reminds Carla that she did make an agreement with Gloria, that she'd split anything she got from Eddie's inheritance or from his insurance policy or whatever it would be with Gloria 50-50. And Carla decides that instead of doing that, she'll buy the gang at Cheers beers and they won't say anything to Gloria. Cut immediately to some time later, and they're all singing For She's a Jolly Good Fellow, which Norm turns into For She's a Tight-Fisted Widow. Frasier is trying to talk to Carla about the guilt that she will feel by not sticking to her promise to Gloria. Carla calls him a quack, which was a funny retort, and then Woody's off to the dress rehearsal. And all he can say about that is, dress rehearsal, what bitter irony, which I thought was fabulous and quite a poetic moment for Woody. I quite liked that, and then the delivery of the line was really great. Sam then asks Norm about Cliff. Turns out Cliff had actually had surgery, and he's on the phone. The payphone, is hanging off the wall. Norm clearly was speaking to Cliff, got fed up of listening to him, so he just let him drone on, and Sam picks up the phone, speaks to Cliff, and also lets the phone hang back down so Cliff can drone on and on. I think it's a nice way to include Cliff a couple of times in the episode. Gloria then enters. She got her hair sorted after they did each other's hair, and she bought a purse for Carla, which was really nice, and Gloria does genuinely seem like a nice, kind person, which makes things even worse for Carla. Just as Frasier predicted, Carla starts to shake. The guilt is really getting to her. And we'll come back to that in a moment. Rebecca is then talking to Sam about sending Woody something for opening night. Sam sent him a watch that he found from the Lost and Found box. I love the colour Rebecca is wearing here. And then Carla starts to shake. And she's shaking a lot. Clearly the guilt is really racking up. And I think there are some great messages in this episode about how guilt very well might eat away at you if you're doing the wrong thing, morally the wrong thing. A smartly dressed Frasier comes back in from Woody's show. Then Norm comes in with Woody. And it turns out he was the only one who was brave enough to get naked, because they had been told, if you don't feel it on the night, you don't have to get naked, which I think was very nice, a very nice thing to say. But it did mean that nobody else felt it on the night. Woody was fed up of being the only person too scared to get naked. So he did. And he deserves a lot of praise for that bravery, but obviously being the only one is going to make it significantly worse. So I can understand why Woody would feel very awkward and uncomfortable, but he deserves a lot of credit. Carla then tells Sam that Gloria knows about the insurance money and that's why she's being nice. And I don't ever believe that. I don't think I ever believed it the first time I watched this. I can't really remember, to be honest. But I don't think that that's a reasonable interpretation from Carla. Though Carla can be quite a suspicious person. So I don't think it's unrealistic that Carla would feel that way. But I certainly don't agree with her. And then Gloria comes in and she tells Carla that she should be at home resting because she was worried about Carla's shaking and she doesn't need to worry about the money she'd lose from her shift because Gloria is going to finish her shift for her. Not really sure she's allowed to do that. I don't know if she could just turn up at a bar and decide to take over somebody's shift when they're not actually hired to work there, but it's certainly a very nice gesture. Carla absolutely loses it. She scrambles for the money, which she's wearing all of the money in her belt around her waist, which seems like a terrible idea, but also not something unlike Carla. I do think it's something Carla would do. And she thrusts the money towards Gloria. And Gloria, very believably, and again I do believe her, said that she didn't know about the money. Carla tries to then take the money back, but ultimately gives Gloria the money. And I think we have some really great lessons there, and I think it is fair to say that Carla did the right thing. Granted, she made the promise when she didn't know about the money, but at the end of the day, morally, I think that's what she should have done. To be honest, I think really morally, Gloria shouldn't have taken the money. Because it wasn't really her money, it was Carla's, and she should have realised, if she were a really good person, that Carla made that promise when she didn't know about the money, and that ultimately she shouldn't take it. It's Carla's, end of story. But at the same time, Carla did promise, and she is basically telling Gloria to take the money so that it eases her conscience, so I don't think it's the worst thing that Gloria did take the money. And Sam, at the end of the episode, asks Carla what she's going to do with the money. And she says that she's going to buy a big expensive car, so the next time she sees Gloria, she can, and I quote, run the slut down, which is quite a strong way to end the episode. And I was also surprised by the use of the word slut there. This was released in 1990. Clearly they could use that word at the time, at whatever time it was broadcast, but it did. It took me by surprise. And I think it's a fabulous episode. As I said, not too much to pick apart, really. No real goofs, no real bloopers, no interesting bits of trivia. It's just a delightful episode, with the exception of the fact that Cliff's not there, of course. But other than that, obviously, no complaints. My personal highlight, my favourite moment, is, of course, the kissing of Norm twice, the throwing him back in his bar stool, the dragging him across the bar. It was just so perfectly executed. Everything about that scene was fantastic. It almost embodied the chaos of Thanksgiving Orphans. Those few seconds were just so fabulous. There was so much going on. Everything was just an escalating element of surprise. It was perfect. The whole episode, 50-50 Carla, is brilliant. Yes, there are some interesting questions morally. I think there are a lot of discussions to be had about whether or not Carla should have given her that money, whether or not Gloria should have taken it. But at the same time, I don't think anybody's actions ultimately were unrealistic or unreasonable in the context. 50-50 Carla, as is pretty much always the case, is a brilliant episode of Cheers.